set up?
Yep.
Are we rolling?
Mm-hmm.
So, today we are lucky enough to have Jeremy Blum come and speak to us about his experiences, the awesome stuff he builds. I'm not sure if you've seen him, but he's got an active blog where he talks about his projects and all the things that he does in school and personally. He was a staff member here doing lead instruction for the New York program right here last year. He's now moving to San Francisco to go work for Google on their glass. And he's done tons of other cool stuff, including a startup that he's got based here in New York. So I'll let him talk about all that stuff. If you have any questions, don't be shy about asking him, stopping in the middle of it, and I'll get out the way.
Cool, thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Hey guys. Okay, cool. I'm really glad to be here because I love BlueStamp. And I taught it last year, and Dave tried to convince me for a very long time to teach it again this summer, which I would have loved to do, but as he said, I'm working on a startup that required all of my attention. But basically, I'll just go through really quick who I am, what I do, pretty pictures and videos, real quick, just so you guys know what I do, and then we'll just talk, because I don't want to talk at you for like 20 minutes. Okay, so Dave mentioned a bunch of this, but I just finished my master's degree in electrical engineering at Cornell University, where I also did my undergrad. For those of you starting to think about where you're going to go to college, you should go to Cornell. And I can answer any questions about that. I worked for 2 years at MakerBot. Who here is familiar with MakerBot? Cool. So for those of you who aren't, are you familiar with 3D printing? Yeah? Okay. So for those who aren't, 3D printing is basically, instead of printing a piece of paper, you print objects out of a machine. So you say, I want a cup, or I want a robot, or whatever, you press print and it appears. So I worked there for 2 years designing all of their electronics. So if you've ever seen a MakerBot, any of the newer ones, the electronics were designed by me. Right now, I'm working on a company called Sun, which is a lighting company I formed where we have basically invented light bulbs that emulate natural sunlight indoors to help mediate your biological clock, reduce depression, make you happier, work better, save energy. And I can talk more about that if you find that interesting. I'm working on manufacturing for that this summer. I just wrote a book that just came out. Actually, all the BlueStamp classes are getting copies to use, but you're not going to get it in time for this one to be over. So I need this one back, but I'll pass it around just so everyone can look at it. But it's online as an ebook too. And Dave also mentioned in about a month, I'm moving out to San Francisco to start full-time at Google X, where I'll be doing hardware design for Google Glass.
Do you have a Google Glass here?
No, I don't. Not with me, sorry.
Have you used one?
I have, and they're very, very, very cool. They're awesome. But hopefully, you know, I'll come back to BlueStamp again next year, and I'll be able to demo it. But in the meanwhile, I don't have one, sorry. Okay, so I'll just like go really quickly through some of the stuff I've done. If any of you, have any of you been on my website or seen some of the stuff I've done? Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna go through really quick, and then afterwards you can ask me any questions you have about it. Okay, this is a robot that plays Guitar Hero with 100% accuracy. This is a claw that you can control over the internet. That's an interactive art display, Jack in the Box, a Nerf sentry gun that tracks people entering a room and shoots at them if you don't have proper identification using image recognition. Remote control car that you drive with a motion sensing glove, 3D printers, belt buckles that say your name and stuff, more 3D printers. That one I was working on a bunch last year. That one can print metal. And basically batteries and motors and all the parts of a robot. Weather stations, all kinds of other weather gizmos. That's a really bad picture of a hack I did in 24 hours to put Facebook inside of an actual book. So like, you open up the book, it shows your Facebook feed, and you turn the pages and it flips through your Facebook feed on the screens. That was part of a hackathon competition, which we won. Sun tracking solar panels, automated room entry systems for hotels. So like instead of swiping a card, you just hold your phone up to the door in your room and it acts as your check-in key. It's a robot that can reassemble truss structures like the International Space Station. lights on my undergraduate graduation cap, more 3D printers. That's a robot that teaches itself how to walk and is entirely 3D printed. That's the circuit board for the lighting project I'm working on right now. That's a view of my master's graduation cap, which was connected to the internet, and 200 people in the audience controlled it from their smartphones. And there's a lot of other stuff. Okay, but pictures only say so much, so I'll just skip through this video real quick and just narrate it myself. So this is a robot that, it's all 3D printed. I just showed a picture of it, but basically it's teaching itself how to walk. So it starts off only with knowledge that it has 8 motors, but it has no idea how they're connected, and it just flails it around randomly until it figures out a methodology that gets it to move forward. This is a robot that traverses a truss structure. Actually, the paper I wrote on this is being published this month in a journal, although I actually did the project like 3 years ago. But it can move around a structure autonomously and remove parts autonomously and reassemble it into a different shape. So you can imagine like the space station or a cell phone tower, anything that's put together with trusses. Turn off the sound on that. It can reassemble it. Actually, this one needs sound. This is the same glove from before, but now a dancer is wearing it. And so she's triggering sound effects with it. This is still part of the same project. The music effects are being generated with the glove. And then we have these LED wands. They're Arduino powered. They talk wirelessly to the music and generate lights based on what's happening in the music. Here, the video in the background, I'm controlling with the glove, and the lights are being moved from that. This is my cap from my master's graduation, so that's the mobile app, someone can pick a color. And then I had, is anyone here using a Raspberry Pi for their project? Okay, cool. So I had a Raspberry Pi I wore on my wrist that connected up to the internet, downloaded the colors, and then talked up to a really, really bright light on my head. You can see it changing the color of the background. And then the cap tweets out at the person who selected the color to show them what they picked. This is just a quick video of some of the colors cycling through. It's kind of hard to see because it washes out the camera because it's incredibly bright. This is the inside look at the Facebook hack that I mentioned earlier. So it looks like disgusting because we did it in 24 hours of sleeping. It was a 24-hour hackathon. But it connects up to the internet, and as you flip the pages, you can't really see on the projector, but it's cycling through the news feed here. And that's what's happening on the computer. Let's skip ahead a little bit. This is a sun tracking solar panel connected up to a car winch, all 3D printed mechanics that moves it up and down and rotates it. So this is a time lapse of it tracking the sun over the course of the day. Although, as some of you might know, it rains a lot in Ithaca, so it's actually, and it's not weatherproof, so I'm testing it indoors, but it is tracking where the sun would be. And that uses GPS and all kinds of good stuff like that. So for those of you who haven't seen a 3D printer, this is the one that I designed all the electronics for, the MakerBot replicator. So here it's printing a model of a skull, a human skull, to scale. Yeah, so that's that. More interactive art projects. Alright. More interactive art projects. I'm really into interactive art projects, even though I'm a terrible artist and a musician. These were Christmas lights that responded to music. Yeah, that's what they look like when they're finished. Sorry, I'm skipping through kind of quick. This is a GPS logger. This is one of the videos I have on my website. You can learn how to make this pretty easily. But this is me doing a speed run around Washington Square Park, and then collecting GPS data as I go with an Arduino and a GPS module. And then afterwards it should show the plot. Yeah, so then afterwards it plots it in Google Maps automatically. Okay, so sorry for running through that very quick. I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the things I do, so you know, ask me questions about. So most of you are here presumably because you like engineering at least a little bit, right? Is that fair to say? Yeah. Okay. So I'm an engineer because it's literally my job to make the world more awesome. That's like what I do every day. It's what I got to do at MakerBot, it's what I'm going to do at Google, it's what I do at my startup now. I just go into work and I work on projects that make the world more awesome. So get excited for that because that's what you have to look forward to. Here are some of the things that I try to focus on in the various projects I work on. And I think kind of where engineers can make the world a better place. I think the biggest one is the world energy crisis. I've done a lot of sustainability research. I didn't show a picture of it, but I've built solar-powered homes and energy control systems and things like that. Improving healthcare, making people's lives easier, just making the world a more awesome place. That's kind of where Google Glass and 3D printing come in. And then teaching the next generation of engineers I also think is incredibly important. So you guys should all thank your instructors and your TAs and Dave for helping make that possible. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to talk very much. I just wanted to show some demos of some of my projects so you have an idea of what you can ask me about. But I kind of just want to chat with you guys. So I can answer questions about college or 3D printing or Google Glass to an extent that I'm allowed to. Or my startup, or life in general. Really, I'm an open book. So let's talk. Yeah.
Were you always in electrical engineering and programming, or when did you get into that?
So I wasn't always into it. Actually, when I started my undergrad, I enrolled as mechanical engineering, and I still like to do a lot of mechanical engineering too. But electrical stuff and computers and electronics in general. I started to kind of get into it initially with building computers when I was in high school, which is not a particularly cheap hobby. So I had a computer repair business in high school, and that's kind of when I started to get into electronics and opening things up. I'll take it back. So I would say like I wasn't. You guys have an earlier start on me for the most part. The stuff that you guys are doing here, I mean, even from the projects I saw in last year's BlueStamp, and I've just taken a peek at what some of you guys are doing this year, you're way ahead of where I was when I was your age. I didn't start doing really real projects until I was probably a freshman in college. I did some stuff before that, but it wasn't nearly as complicated as the things you guys are doing. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think of these projects? Is it something you just like sit down?
No, it's very rarely like, I don't think I've ever sat down and been like, I need to come up with something to do and just like sit there and stare at a wall. With a lot of them, it's something that I feel I need, I want for some other reason. Or sometimes someone else inspires me to do them. So like a good example was, or I want to one up myself. For my undergraduate graduation, the night before graduation, I was out to dinner with a friend and be like, yeah, you know, it'd be cool if you had like lights in your hat. I was like, oh, that's such a cool idea. Too bad graduation is tomorrow. But I had enough parts to just make one anyway, just that night, which I did, but it like wasn't bright enough outside. And so like I decided that night, like, oh, I'm coming back for my master's. Next year I'm going to make it like way more ridiculous just because I wanted to one up myself. It's sometimes it's trying to address a need that I think I've noticed. So with like the glove I designed, for example, the Sudo glove, I was taking like an interaction design class, and I was getting frustrated with the options available for interacting with hardware and computers in general. Mouse and keyboard is pretty limited. There's a few more things out there now. I don't know. Have any of you seen like the Leap Motion controller? No, maybe I'll take. I have one in my backpack, so maybe I'll take it out and show you in a bit. But there's a lot more. Well, you've all seen like the Kinect, right? The Microsoft Kinect for the Xbox. You can move around and stuff, gesture recognition. There's a lot more stuff out there now, but there used to not be. And I was kind of frustrated by the lack of how you can interact with machines. So I was like, oh, I'll just make something. And it wasn't. I mean, it was not very good, especially the first version. It got a lot better as I kind of worked on it. but a lot of the project ideas come from things that I personally feel I need, and usually, not always, because if you're an eccentric engineer, it's not always the case, but usually if you feel you need something, odds are someone else feels they need it too. And it's usually a good idea to go around and ask for, like, would this be useful to you? Can you see a use case for this? And I usually do a little bit of that before starting on like really complex projects. But the simpler ones, if I just think they'll be fun and I'll learn, and I know I'll learn from them, I'll just do them for the hell of it. Yeah.
I have a question about MakerBot.
Okay.
Do you know what kind of things they're going to be coming out with in the future?
So they're releasing a 3D scanner in a few weeks. They announced it at South by Southwest conference in April. I actually designed all the electronics and firmware for that too. But I've since left MakerBot, so they've probably made adjustments to the electronics since I left, but I designed the first version. I know that something they're kind of focused on is the whole, they want to bring the whole ecosystem together, so I think the scanner is going to help with that. And so for those who can't kind of visualize what a 3D scanner is, imagine you have this coffee cup and you want to make a second one. You kind of put it on the scanner bed, it rotates around, lasers scan it, it makes a 3D model, and then you can print it immediately. It's more practical for some things than other things. It's definitely more practical for like making copies of trinkets. But that's definitely something they're focused on. Another big thing that has been the focus of the company since the beginning is trying to make 3D printing more accessible and cheaper. So I know they're trying to make the machines cheaper. It's not necessarily as easy as it sounds. But I know that that's what their investors want. So I anticipate the prices going down in the next few years, but beyond that, I don't really know. Yeah.
So it seems like you do a lot of teaching other people, like with your Arduino tutorials and your new book, but you also do a bunch of personal projects. So do you enjoy one over the other?
No, I like doing both, and almost every personal project that I do, I'll document in some way so that others can duplicate it. And this is another thing that we can talk about also, which is the whole concept of open source. I'm an expert in that. But I open source a lot of my personal projects, so they kind of serve two purposes. One, like, I just wanted to do it, so I just do it. And then I open source all the design files for it so that someone else can do it also and they can learn from it. And I kind of benefit in that I get to do what I wanted to do, and I get to teach people, which feels good and makes me happy. But I wouldn't say I prefer one over the other. I definitely like doing both. And, if Dave had his way, I would be teaching 24/7 nonstop and doing nothing else. Which
No, that's not true.
I don't disagree with.
It'd be half and half.
Okay, half and half. And I really love teaching, but so taking the job at Google, for example, which is probably going to take up an insane amount of my time, is I want to learn more so that I can do a better job teaching people. So it's always kind of a back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the topic of open source, like we talk about that a lot. Whoever comes, we always ask them about open source. So what do you think about it? Do you think it's a foolproof idea? Do you think that more companies should be moving toward it? I think it was Matt who told me that MakerBot, the company I used to work for, is now moving away from open source and open hardware. And
I shed a tear a little bit every time.
so like, what do you think about that? Do you think that you could have like a company just on open
So
hardware?
I mean, that's a whole can of worms. I could talk about that for 3 hours if we wanted. I just got back from the International Open Source Convention in Portland, Oregon, like 3 days ago. So the short answer is there isn't just one answer. It's totally different for every company and every scenario. So really what it comes down to is, for some companies it makes sense, for some companies it doesn't. For software companies, the concept of open source software has been around a lot longer. I would say it's been developing over the course of the last 30 years. So making systems work and making profits around open source software is, I would say, a little bit less tricky than open source hardware. Open source software is nice because you don't have to pay for production costs of copies of the software. Open source hardware gets a little bit trickier because when you're open sourcing hardware designs, someone who hypothetically has access to better manufacturing capabilities can produce the same thing as you for less money and undercut your price and push you out of business even if you design the original thing. So in the open source hardware world, open source really makes sense the most when you're using it to drive community engagement. So I'm sure like half people in this room are using parts from Adafruit, for example. Are you guys familiar with that company? They're based in Manhattan. Yes, no, a little bit, maybe. Okay, so Adafruit is an entirely open source hardware company. Most of you are probably using something ordered from them. I assume you guys ordered a bunch of stuff from Adafruit, right?
All the time.
Yeah. So I guarantee you everyone in this room has used stuff from them. So what they do is they'll like design something, release all the design files and information open source and tutorials to go along with it, and then they drive loyalty to their brand because people appreciate them releasing everything and use all of their resources. And so even if it costs a little bit more or whatever, people still buy from Adafruit because there's a strong community around it. In that scenario, it makes a lot of sense. For a large hardware company like, let's say, GE, General Electric, to release a design for a microwave open source, like for them, that makes no sense because the average consumer doesn't care if their microwave is open source, and they're just going to buy whatever is the cheapest and the most reliable. So it depends significantly on the company and the kinds of people who are using the products. And I think that's going to change a lot over the next few years as the concept becomes more well known to a lot of people. And then in the world of software, it's a similar thing. Does your community get more benefit than not from releasing software open source? And if so, it makes sense to release it open source, and a lot of companies are adopting that now. And even last week when I was at the open source convention, like half the companies there were massive companies who are making moves towards open source because developers want it. It makes it easier for them to develop for their platform, and every company now is all about like the ecosystem, right? So Apple kind of figured this out first. If you lock people into an ecosystem of your products, they want to use the computer, they want to use the iPhone, they want to use the iOS software, all that stuff, they're more likely to continue buying stuff from you. And other companies want to do that too, and the best way to do that is if you release lots of open source developer tools that make it really easy for developers to write software that will run on your ecosystem so that it's more robust. So in that scenario, open source makes a tremendous amount of sense even for large companies. Does that answer? I know it was long-winded, but
yeah.
Do you see smart glasses and smartwatches really taking off in the near future?
No, I don't. Not in the next few years at least. I think wearable tech is going to have a very significant impact over the course of the next few decades, probably. I don't think in the next 5 years you're going to see everyone with computers attached to their face. You'll see a lot of nerds with it. You'll see me with it for sure. But there's always kind of this very strange human preference for existing user interfaces, regardless of how well they're designed or not. So the perfect example is the mouse and keyboard. If computers hadn't been invented and we were just inventing computers now for the first time, with all the other technology being where it is, we never would have invented the mouse and keyboard in their current incarnation. But because they already exist, it's going to take us decades to move away from using them. And only now we're starting to see other user interfaces, and the same goes for wearable technology too. Same thing goes for mobile phones. We've gotten used to this particular form factor. Like, if you think about it, there's not a tremendously good reason why a phone exists in the shape or form factor that it does. It started off with handheld phones, which were then kind of smushed down into cordless phones, which were then kind of smushed down into mobile phones, and it just was this evolution of a form factor. Whereas if we had thought about things in different order, it might have evolved completely differently. So I think the technology will continue to evolve, and watches and glasses and things like that over the next few years, but the general public is going to be slow to adopt it because people hate change, and it's something, unfortunately, that's hard to work with, and a lot of the marketing for those things will be key in how you present them to people, but a lot of people, understandably, are adverse to being too connected to their technology, and I can understand that too as a person who likes disconnect also sometimes. So I think it's going to be heavily dependent upon the marketing, but give it more than 5 years before it's really caught on in a significant way, if I had to guess. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Google Glass and?
So I can't say too much. A, because I haven't started working there and honestly don't know that much yet. And B, because even if I had started working there, I wouldn't be able to tell you, except I'd have to kill you. For those uninitiated, Google Glass is developed in Google's X Lab is what it's called, which was completely secret until about 2 years ago when some jerks from the New York Times investigated it and found out that it existed, and Google was forced to announce it. But Google X is where Google kind of develops all their secret hardware projects. So their self-driving car is developed in X Labs, Glass is developed in X Labs. Project Loon, which was just announced about 2 weeks ago, is developed in X Labs, which is a high-altitude balloon-based internet system for connecting rural areas to the internet, which is, you should watch the video on it, it's very cool. But really what I can say about Google Glass is it's out in the wild now, right? There's the Explorer program, a few thousand people who have them. They want people to develop software for it to make it more intuitive and useful. Having used the hardware only a little bit, I will say it's extremely cool. I don't yet know how it will fit into my or anyone else's daily life exactly, but I do know people. One of mine and Dave's mutual friends just got a pair and he's been wearing them every day, and he said he's finding them very useful, especially the camera functionality. But I can't say that much because I don't really know that much yet. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how specifically do you use it? Like, is there like a handheld thing that
No, so there's two means of interaction. One is voice and the other one is touch. So the on the right side of the glasses, there's like, so if you look at the side of my glass, it's like a little bit thicker, and this thing is actually a touchpad. It's very sensitive. It actually works very well. You kind of just like swipe back and forth like this, and there's an overlay in front of your entire vision. So even though it just, you guys have all seen like pictures of what Google Glass looks like, right? There's like a little glass prism on the upper right side here. So it's not like you're just looking at a little box in your vision. It actually pretty much takes up your entire field of view. But because it's so close to your eye, the focus is said to be at infinity, which means no matter where you're focusing in space, there's kind of always digital overlay on top of it that's perfectly in focus. So like if I'm looking at you right now, it might, I might see a clock up here, or someone might be tweeting at me up here, and I could be ignoring you and reading my Twitter. And obviously the display deactivates if you're not using it to save power, and so that you can maintain normal conversations with other human beings. But you kind of just swipe back and forth, and it slides through cards. So because you don't have buttons and a touchscreen and stuff, you can't have like app icons that you have to cycle through. That'd be totally non-intuitive. So it kind of intelligently shuffles cards of information based on what it thinks would be most useful to you at that moment based on how you use the system. And you can like pin things to the top. So if you're walking down the street and it knows that you have an appointment, it might like maybe he wants to use overlaid navigation. And so like you would tap this and it would bring up the navigation. You could walk down the street and it would tell you where to turn, and it kind of overlays on top of your field of view. And then the other way, so swiping like would shift
like
through those
above,
cards.
like you see other stuff, and then directly above it is the glasses.
Yeah, so it's like what's the best way to describe it? Are you guys familiar with the concept of, any of you who play video games might know like heads-up display? You know, like when you play a video game and it's like as if you were wearing a helmet and you see the world, but transparently over it is information. And it's pretty non-invasive. It's kind of hard to describe without putting them on. I wish like I had a pair. But it's like a transparent overlay of what you're currently seeing. So it depends on what you're doing, but if you're like using the navigation functionality, it would actually, like you would see on the street an arrow saying like turn on that street up there, because it has a camera in the front too.
So how does it display in any place except for the little...
Oh, because it's so close to your face, because it's so close to your eye, it's basically like a visual trick that's playing on you, the way the mirrors are aligned. So it's not your full field of view, but it's almost your full field of view. It doesn't just look like a little thing because it's so close. Your eye focuses it out to infinity, and I don't know. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this. It's very hard to explain without trying it on.
I have to like see it on me.
I'm sure all of you will get an opportunity to try it at some point in the future. But yeah, there's not like a very good way to explain it without trying it on. It's very hard to conceptualize if you've never experienced a heads-up display before. But that's kind of and then you can voice activate it too. Yeah.
So what's out now almost complete or like?
So what's out now is like a finished first version of the product. So you can think of it as like release 1.0. But as with any product, you're working on further developments, improved battery life, better robustness, that kind of stuff. The one that's out now is basically it's kind of like a beta test. It's gone out mostly to developers and kind of tech people to work out all the issues with it. I think pretty much anyone was able to sign up for the Explorer program, but you had to plop down $1,500. And I think part of the requirement of it is like you have to give us feedback on how it's doing. So it is like a finished product. They have like a marketing team and a sales team and all that stuff working on it. But I wouldn't. There's still a lot of work to be done on it. Yeah, it's still very new technology. Yeah.
So how'd you get that job at Google? Must be an interesting story.
Yeah, so that evolved over the course of like a year. Google X does not recruit, nor do they post job openings online, nor do they like technically exist. It's a long story, but basically someone I went to college with works at Google now. He graduated a few years before me, but he works at Google in New York. He used to work for Google Africa. And a friend of his works on glass, and they were both at the MakerBot store in Manhattan and got their heads scanned. At the MakerBot store, you can get your head scanned and 3D printed. And they were there, and my friend Ben, who I'd gone to Cornell with, was like, hey, we could pay to have it printed here, or like I bet my friend Jeremy could print it because he has several 3D printers and give them to us. So I did, and actually his friend who works at Google Glass was wearing glass in the 3D scan. This was before glass was publicly released.
He was allowed to go around wearing it.
Yeah, there was a period in between when it was announced and was released to the public for purchase where Google employees were wearing them. So I kind of met him in a somewhat interesting way through that. And I said, hey, so like you're working on glass, why don't I take my resume and just show it around the office? So he took it, he sent it in. I think Google receives like, I don't know about Google X, but I know Google receives like 100,000 resumes a year, something ridiculous. But it ended up on someone's desk, and one of the person's desks who it ended up on, the lab, lots of Cornell connections here. The lab that I worked in at Cornell for 5 years, where I did that trust robot and the self-learning like spider robot. The person who's actually now going to be my boss at Google X worked there for 5 years under the same professor as me. He saw that I worked in the same lab as him, called my professor, who advises that lab, say, hey, is this kid legit? I guess my professor said yes. That only at that point then did Google reach out to me and say, hey, you want to do an interview? And even then, they wouldn't let me interview for Google X. I had to interview for like 4 other hardware teams at Google: the Google Chrome hardware team, the Google Street View hardware team that designs the Street View car, which also would have been really cool. There was one other team I don't even remember. The Android hardware team. And I interviewed all of them, and then like only once I got to the campus, they were like, hey, come interview at X while you're here also. And I was like, okay. And I did that. And then there was a lot of silence. And then a while later, they're like, okay, Chrome hardware or Google X want you to come work here, or which one do you want? And I was like, well, which one do you think I should work at? And they said X, and I was like, good, okay, so then I said yes. So it's a very long story. But two key takeaways. One, if anyone is remotely related to anything you want to be doing, throw your resume in their face, and you're never too young to have a resume. You guys can put all these projects on one, or at least like put together a little website with a listing of projects, just so you can like show people what you've done. And the second takeaway is networking is good and tremendously hard for a lot of people, but it's a skill I strongly recommend you try to get good at, especially as you you don't need to worry about this too much now, but once you do get into college, just like talk to everyone. Just talk to everyone, because the more people you know, the better chances you have of meeting someone interesting who can help you out or you can help them out. And it always has to be a two-way street, right? Mutually beneficial. You help someone, they help you. Sometimes I wish it wasn't the way the world works and that it was entirely a meritocracy, but the fact is the world is not entirely meritocracy. Part of it is about who you know. And you have to talk to people to meet interesting people and find interesting paths you might not otherwise find. So, very long answer to a very short question. Yeah.
What other things should we do to try to like guide our path to get where you are today?
Well, so not all of you might want to get to exactly where I am today. You all probably have your own goals and aspirations, right? I would say, so, I mean, one of the things I just said is like just networking is like very important. And it's not something that in high school I would expect you to be good at, or because I sure as hell was not. But it's something I got a lot better at college. Like, just go to every event. Anytime there's a tech talk, or even in New York City all the time. Have any of you heard of like meetups? Yeah, like meetup.com. There's like New York tech hardware meetups like every week in New York, and entrepreneurship meetups and all kinds of things. I go to a bunch of them, all kinds of interesting people, usually free food, which is always nice. You'll also learn that in college. Also seek out free food at any time, but that's unrelated. I think it's really important to talk to a lot of people. The other thing is just people know when you're full of crap, so don't be full of crap. Do things because you like doing them, and you're all here, so you obviously like doing the things you're doing. You wouldn't be here otherwise. But if you're just passionate and you express your passion about the things you're doing, people will appreciate that. So, any good recruiter or anyone who might be able to be in a situation that would help you can always smell through like lies or you kind of not telling the full story. I think it's just really important to be honest, do the things that you care about doing regardless of what other people think of them. Do them, and then don't just like keep it to yourself. Like, tell people. If you did something awesome, you should like tell people how awesome it is. Making amazing projects is meaningless if no one ever learns about them or gets to benefit from them in any way other than you. So if you do something great, even if it's just a really lame like 2-minute video that shows it working, put it online, take pictures. You guys all have to like write blog posts for this class, right? Or for BlueStamp. That's documenting your progress. Like there's a good reason why you have to do that for BlueStamp. It's a very smart thing to do because now you have a record of things you can point to. And that for me was definitely the most helpful thing is when you can walk into an interview or meet someone new and say, not just say like I worked on these things, but say here's a website and you can actually look at all the things I did and you can copy them or you can do whatever you want with them. That makes a big difference. Yeah.
So I noticed that your Arduino tutorials are sponsored by Element 14.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that originally happen? Did they notice you or did you contact them?
Yeah. So they got in touch with me. I had done I had done a whole bunch of other videos before that. And actually it helped. It kind of happened the same way the book happened, which was the publisher approached me. But it was clear that there was a market in Arduino. Okay, how many people are using Arduino for their project in some way or another? Okay, like more than half the class.
I just watched a video of you today.
Okay, perfect. Which one?
It was
The one about serial communication.
Okay, cool.
what's going on?
So there's clearly a market for it, right? Like people are using it. Element 14 is an electronics distributor. They said, okay, we know people are using this. Kind of what I said before about open source. People are more likely to buy from your brand if they're loyal to your brand because you're providing them with good content. So like that's the way that Adafruit does so well, is they have a lot of awesome content on their website that goes along with what they sell. So Element 14 this was 2.5 years ago now. Element 14 wanted to sell Arduinos. They wanted content to go along with them. They emailed me because I had given a bunch of talks and surprise, I had put them on YouTube and promoted them so that people would know about them. So if I hadn't done that, they never would have contacted me. And what Element 14 doesn't know is that I was planning to make an Arduino tutorial series anyway and not get paid for it and just do it. But they very conveniently called me and I was like, hey, how about you give me a bunch of money for each video and I'll put your name in it. So that kind of just worked out. But so they ended up sponsoring me, and it ended up being mutually beneficial because, like I was saying before, it's about getting what you're doing out there. And the more people you can get to help you promote it, the better. So I was like, yeah, you put it on your website, I'll put it on mine. And one very important arrangement I made with them, and this is really important if any of you ever consider doing anything like this, is I said I maintain all ownership of copyright on everything I do. So Element 14 owns nothing of what I've done. I've given them special permission to post them and use it in promotional materials any way they want, but it means that I can also reuse it any way I want, make advertising revenue from it. Not a lot, admittedly, but it's something. And I can use it to do my own promotional stuff, including lots of references to the videos in this book and utilizing them for that. So yes, they approached me, and it just kind of was a mutually beneficial thing. It made it a lot easier for me to produce them because I didn't have to worry about money I could have been making by doing other things in that time period it took to produce them because they were paying me. Yeah.
Do you think that someone using a Google Glass like while walking down the street could be really dangerous? Like if they're paying attention to the heads-up display and it tells them to make a left, do you think they might get hit by a car or something and sue Google for a lot of money?
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant concern. I think it's an even more terrifying concern than the car. I think a couple of states have already outlawed wearing Google Glass while driving, which I think is smart. Yeah, I think it's a very serious concern. It's one of the reasons that I mentioned before, why I don't see this catching on immediately. It's still very much an experimental technology, and we don't know how people are going to interact with it exactly. That being said, if you look at it from the flip side, if you walk down any average street in New York City now, over the course of 5 minutes, you'll see 20 people staring down at their feet, looking at their phone, crossing, jaywalking across the street, right? So the follow-up to that question is, can we utilize Google Glass to allow people to still be addicted to their technology, which they're going to be regardless. You can't change human nature. But allow them to at least do it in a way that's slightly more safe, so that if a car is coming, maybe the screen flashes in front of them and says stop or you're going to get hit by a car. And I'm just kind of spitballing, but I think it can kind of go both ways. And initially, yeah, I think people are going to be a major hazard to themselves and others because they're not going to really know what they're doing, and we're not going to be properly oriented with the new technology. But down the line, actually, I think it might be better than the way we currently interact with our smartphones. So it's yet to be seen. Yeah.
I see you have a Twitter account on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Is that helping you make connections in other countries?
Yes, it does. I have met a surprising number of people through Twitter, which I didn't anticipate at first, and I initially thought Twitter was stupid, and I honestly still think Twitter is kind of stupid, but I do use it anyway because it is an easy way to connect with people. And so whenever I do give a presentation or anything like this, I always put my Twitter on there. Because if it's to a larger audience, it gives people a way to ask me questions kind of off of the stage or whatever I'm on, and give me an opportunity to respond to them. The other thing it lets me do is through my website, I have a contact form, and people email me a lot. And I say right on the website, like, I get a ton of emails and I can't respond to anyone. But if you can compress your question into 180 characters and answer it on Twitter, you're like way more likely to get a response from me. So that's one thing that's useful for. I do also find that it makes people who I find inspiring a lot more accessible. People who you would not ordinarily be able to have an email conversation with, or a telephone call with, or an in-person conversation with. I've had extended conversations over Twitter. Extended conversations, they're pretty short, but more than what you get otherwise, with people who I really admire and look up to and have Twitter accounts for the exact same reason that I use Twitter, which is they can more reasonably respond to people. I haven't gotten Barack Obama or Elon Musk to tweet back at me yet, but I'm still working on that. But I have spoken to other people who I wouldn't otherwise get to talk to, and for that reason I recommend it. And also for posting cat photos. Yeah.
So I see that you did like a lot of projects. Did you get funding for any of these from any places?
Some of them yes, some of them no. All the ones that had Arduino tutorials based around them, yes. A lot of the just like random open source ones, like my graduation cap and stuff. Oh, actually, that was partially sponsored. Yes, I have done plenty of things that were not. What I do tend to do is convince companies to give me free hardware, saying I'll do a project with them because they know my videos get a lot of views, and I'll like give a shout out to the company, and it helps them from a marketing perspective. Some of them I will sponsor myself just because I want to do them, like the Facebook hack. I just used parts I had, things like that. But you can kind of think of it as an investment if you market it correctly. So the Facebook one, I used a bunch of my own stuff, but then we won first prize and I got a free Roku player, which is worth like $150. And with a lot of the other things, I just post in videos. The glove, for example, I didn't have any funding for. But if you work hard on something and it comes out really cool and you can get it online, it helps you promote yourself personally, which is beneficial down the line. Get your name out there. And then I had like Discovery Channel feature it and things like that.